Welcome back to the show. We got a great show for you guys tonight. Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. I had a great one myself. Got one day off and it was definitely good. Had some time to reflect and spend some quality time with family and friends. But today we're going to dive into D.B. Cooper, the 53-year-old skyjacking, the only skyjacking in American history that's unsolved. It's quite remarkable. We're going to react to two documentaries which have dissenting narratives. One says that he survived the fall. The other says that he perished during the fall. So we're going to react to both of those. But for those of you that are unfamiliar with what happened, on November 24th, 1971, a man known only by his pseudonym hijacked a plane, demanded a ransom, and parachuted into oblivion. It all started at Portland International Airport, where a man using the alias Dan Cooper, later mistakenly referred to as D.B. Cooper, bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. Dressed in a suit, tie, and dark sunglasses, he seemed unremarkable until he passed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. The note was simple. "Miss, I have a bomb. Please sit by me." He showed her what looked like dynamite from his briefcase and demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. The plane landed in Seattle, where he released the passengers and got his demands he met. After refueling, they took off again, heading to Mexico, but somewhere over southwest Washington, Cooper parachuted, disappearing into the night. The evidence we know of is that his tie was left behind on the plane, which later analysis suggested he might have had connections to aerospace industry due to traces of industrial chemicals found on it. And in 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram found $5,800 of Cooper's money along the Columbian River. Serial numbers matched, proving it was from ransom, suggesting Cooper or someone might have buried it or it was washed down. One of the parachutes found in 2017 was not only used by Cooper, but it was packed, and the ticket stub was found with fingerprints, but it didn't match any database at the time or since. The cigarette butts was the biggest L from the FBI. They literally lost the evidence of the 8 cigarette butts that D.B. Cooper smoked that night. That would have proven with DNA technology today who that was. We would have literally found out who exactly Dan Cooper was based off of those cigarette butts. But no, that was the one piece of evidence that was lost. Of course, here's all the theories of what happened to D.B. Cooper before we react to the videos. The death theory says that D.B. Cooper died from the jump due to harsh weather conditions, unfamiliar terrain, or malfunctioning parachutes. No body was ever found, which could have meant it was never looked for in the right place, or animals or nature could have taken place. The escape theory is that Cooper, an experienced skydiver, landed safely, hid the money, and lived out his days, perhaps ever returning to normal life. Then you have the accomplice theory. He had help on the ground with a getaway vehicle or directions where to jump, explaining his survival and disappearances. Then lastly, you have the hoax theory. Some believe Cooper might have staged his own death or disappearance for insurance fraud to escape his troubles. We've had years and years and years of investigation, and in 2016, the FBI decided to drop this case completely because you would consider the person who is D.B. Cooper is likely dead today or is extremely old. Now, that doesn't justify what happened, but knowing that D.B. Cooper could have potentially worked for Boeing or could have been a government contractor definitely plays a big part into what could have really happened on that day in November 24th, 1971. First, we're going to react to the National Geographic documentary.
He was the first man in U.S. history to hijack a plane for ransom. He leapt out of a commercial jet with a parachute, $200,000, and was never seen again, dead or alive. The mystery has frustrated the FBI for nearly 40 years.
I think he was just a sleazy, rotten criminal.
But has given the public a lasting legend. Who was D.B. Cooper? Did he survive? Now, for the first time, new scientific evidence could finally help unravel the mystery of D.B. Cooper. It's the eve of Thanksgiving, and people around the country are traveling to get home.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
In Portland, Oregon, a man under the name of Dan Cooper pays $20 for the 2:45 flight to Seattle-Tacoma. Flight 305 is one of the shortest journeys on Northwest Orient schedules.
And guys, in perspective, when you're traveling in 1970s before 9/11, there was no TSA, there was no security. You would just buy your ticket and you would get on the plane. And there was no Expedia, there was no like pre-ordering tickets. You literally just walked in, bought your ticket, no IDs, and just walked on the plane. So times were a lot different back then.
Half an hour in normal conditions. There are no security or identity checks on domestic flights.
So in 1971, it was possible to board an airplane carrying a gun, carrying a bomb, carrying knives, carrying weapons. Nobody checked. You could just get on and go as Dan Cooper did.
The slim man in his mid-40s is wearing mirrored sunglasses and dressed like a typical businessman. He takes his seat at the back of the plane. Stewardess Florence Schaffner takes his drink order.
Bourbon and cinnamon on the rocks, please.
Okay.
Port departure, Mr. Orient 305 and route for 18.5.
On takeoff, the man hands Florence an envelope.
This is for you.
At first, she thinks he's flirting,
Now pay close attention to
but his
Florence
insistent
Schaffner,
gaze
because she was
persuades her to
allegedly
open
one of
the
the people
envelope.
that people have
The
said that
note
she could
reads,
have.
"Miss, I have a bomb
Now
here
pay close attention
would like
to
you to
Florence
sit by me."
Schaffner because she's one of. Now pay close attention to Florence Schaffner because she's one
The
of many
shocked
people
stewardess
that have been
asks the man
speculated to
if
be
he's
working with
serious.
DB Cooper. That's one of them. Pay close attention to Florence Schaffner.
She
the flight
calls her
attendant.
colleague,
Some have
Tina
speculated that
Mucklow.
she was working with DB Cooper. Others
Inside
say
the
she was just
hijacker's
there in a
briefcase.
strange coincidence.
He reveals what appears to be a bomb. He holds the bare ends of two wires, threatening to blow up the plane unless his demands are met.
There's a man, he's sitting in the back, and he has a bomb.
Northwest Orient and the FBI are alerted.
The dispatcher told me that there had been a hijacking of a Northwest airliner at Portland Airport and to get there pronto.
Meanwhile, Cooper makes his demands.
$200,000 cash.
He wants $200,000 placed in a knapsack.
I want 4.
He also wants 4 parachutes,
Now they're gonna
2 main back chutes, and 2 safety front chutes. The terrified attendant takes both notes forward to the captain. Later, Cooper will demand these notes back. Northwest Orient quickly agrees to the demands. FBI agents contact Sea First Bank in Seattle. The bank provides money with pre-recorded serial numbers. The man calling himself Dan Cooper seems calm, sipping his bourbon while smoking his way through nearly half a pack of Raleigh cigarettes. Later, Florence Schaffner would even say that the man seemed rather nice.
Something they forgot to leave out there, maybe they're going to bring it up in the future, but people have said that Cooper stated he wants $200 in American currency. So if that's true, what American who's requesting ransom is going to say, I want $200 in American currency? That almost sounds like that could be a foreigner. So it's possible he could be from Canada. It's possible he's from a different country. So keep that in mind.
Northwest 305, right?
Finally, the ransom money and parachutes arrive at the airport.
Copy. Orient 305.
Cooper insists that they taxi to a remote part of the runway. Cooper failed to specify the denomination of the ransom money, and the $200,000 is made up of $20 bills. It weighs 23 pounds. The passengers, still unaware of the threat, are released, along with 2 attendants, including Florence Schaffner. The rest of the flight crew remains captive. The plane is refueled and cleared for takeoff. The hijacker demands that they fly at 10,000 feet, with landing gear and flaps down. The plane's speed will be limited to around 200 miles per hour. He wants to fly to Mexico City.
Tina, we cannot make it to Mexico.
But there's not enough fuel on board.
We can't make it to Mexico City, it's too far.
The captain offers Reno or Phoenix.
Reno's nice. Let's go to Reno.
Seattle Center.
The autopilot is set on flight path Victor 23, which allows for low altitude flying. Meanwhile, 2 Air Force jets shadow the plane. But they can't maintain such a low speed and have to circle around the hijacked plane. Cooper orders Tina Mucklow to join her colleagues in the cockpit. Tina notices that Cooper is tying something around his waist. She thinks he's attaching the bag of money to himself.
Captain, I have an indication of the aft stairway door has been opened.
Stairway door.
The warning light indicates that the
don't
rear
open that
door
in
and
flight.
stairs have been deployed.
Jump out.
A Boeing 727 is one of the only commercial planes with rear stairs. In 1971, there's nothing to stop them being deployed during flight. The crew are terrified that Cooper will jump, then detonate the bomb still on board.
Captain, we are losing pressure. We are losing cabin pressure.
Exactly what happens next has been in debate for nearly 40 years. The only clear thing is that Dan Cooper was never seen or heard from again. Today, the FBI is recruiting the public to help catch the thief, applying new technology to old evidence, and even recreating the jump in the hope of finally discovering the fate of D.B. Cooper. In the Seattle office of the FBI, Special Agent Larry Carr is taking a new look at the case of D.B. Cooper.
This is the only hijacking in the United States that has been unsolved. We have very long memories in the FBI, and we like to be 100% successful. So we're determined to do the best we can to solve the case.
Agent Carr is for the first time in FBI history recruiting the help of the public. These citizen sleuths have offered their services for free in the hope of finally solving the mystery of D.B. Cooper. Paleontologist Tom Kacee could soon uncover new secrets from Cooper's tie left on board. Microscopic fibers might prove where he lived.
We're hoping this will put us on the trail from where Cooper came from.
But first, the team scrutinizes every detail of the original investigation. By the time the hijacked plane landed in Reno, dozens of agents were already on the case.
Nobody believed that he was going to jump. And the fact that the plane arrived in Reno and he was not on it was surprising to everybody.
All that was recovered from the plane was a black tie and tie pin, a sports parachute and an opened safety chute, plus Cooper's cigarette butts. The glass he'd handled is mixed up with others and never identified. Everything else, it seems, Dan Cooper has taken with him. The ransom notes, the homemade bomb, and the money have all disappeared. Overnight, an FBI composite sketch is drawn from witness statements. Boeing aviation experts calculate Dan Cooper's drop zone. The plane was on autopilot, so the exact flight path is known. But exactly when did Dan Cooper jump? Agents pore over the captain's report. The most likely moment is when the pressure change was reported at around 8:10. Factoring in the strong westerly winds creates a huge search area of 28 square miles. At first light, on Thanksgiving 1971, just outside Ariel, Washington, one of the biggest manhunts in U.S. history begins. Helicopters and spotter planes assist scores of FBI agents and National Guardsmen.
The military got involved with a number of troops, and the FBI had 30 to 40 agents involved in the search.
For weeks, the team combs the forests and farmlands around Ariel, but find nothing. Dead or alive, Dan Cooper has seemingly vanished.
When he got on a plane in Portland, Oregon last night, he was just another passenger who gave his name as D.A. Cooper. But today, after hijacking a Northwest Airlines jet, ransoming the passengers in Seattle, then making a getaway by parachute somewhere between there and Reno, Nevada, the description on one wire service, master criminal.
In one newspaper, the hijacker is mistakenly named D.B. Cooper.
We corrected him and told him the guy's name was...
That's the thing. So he requested 4 parachutes. 3 of them end up working. 1 was a dummy chute. He ended up going with the old World War I believe it was World War I or World War II parachute because he knew how to operate it. So again, it almost gives you a clue that he was in the military or had some sort of intelligence when it comes to skydiving.
Dan Cooper, but DB is catchier than Dan, so the name stuck with him forever.
Initially, the FBI concludes that the hijacker was probably an experienced parachutist.
The fact that he did jump certainly says that he is someone who is much more familiar with aircraft and with parachuting than the average person.
Agents check records of hundreds of ex-paratroopers and pilots in the hope of finding their man. Then, a breakthrough. An almost identical skyjacking convinces the FBI that D.B. Cooper has struck again. On April 7, 1972, a man under the alias James Johnson hijacks a United Airlines Boeing 727. He demands $500,000, 4 parachutes, and leaps out from the aft stairs somewhere over Utah. The hijacker might have gotten away with it had he not previously boasted to an acquaintance. He claimed that he could have done the D.B. Cooper heist, but would have asked for $500,000. On a tip, the FBI storms the home of Richard McCoy, an ex-Vietnam pilot, married with 2 small children. In a cupboard, they find a jumpsuit and a duffel bag filled with $500,000. McCoy is arrested on suspicion of both hijackings. But the FBI finds no evidence to connect McCoy with the Cooper crime.
McCoy's picture was shown to the witnesses that had interaction with D.B. Cooper and said, no, that's not him.
McCoy is found guilty of the United hijacking and sentenced to 45 years in state penitentiary. But the fact that he survived the leap from a commercial plane adds to growing opinion that D.B. Cooper also lived on. Then, in 1980, after almost a decade of dead ends, a major breakthrough. On February 7th, Brian Ingram and his father Dwayne collect firewood on the banks of the Columbia River. Suddenly, Brian feels something buried in the sand.
Right when I come across the edge of it, it's like, you know, well, let me get this out of the way. What is this? This is junk, you know, and pulling it up out of there, and it's like, wait a minute, what the heck do we have here?
The young boy uncovers 3 bundles of moldy cash, with the rubber bands still intact. The father and son turn it into the FBI. Some of the bills are impossible to identify, but most in the middle of the bundle are legible. The serial numbers are checked against the money stolen by Dan Cooper. It's a match. $5,800 from the original $200,000 ransom money. But the new find confuses the FBI.
The money was outside of the area that we felt was the search area. So how it got there was something that we puzzled a little bit over and, of course, didn't have an answer to.
The money is found more than 20 miles from Dan Cooper's drop zone and in the opposite direction from where the wind was blowing. To add to the confusion, geologists determine that the money is sitting above an area dredged in 1974. It means that the bundles of cash arrived at least.
That's the thing. If he landed in the water, his chances of survival are little to none considering the temperature that night. But when it comes to this Tom K guy's theory, I just think it's too much of a stretch to say that the money washed up in this exact spot and his body was eaten up by the propeller and the boat took his body to this exact spot. Again, he could be right. It's an interesting theory, but it seems more of a conspiracy than, really speculating that, 1, he could have landed and survived, or 2, maybe he landed in the water and was eaten by sharks and all the money just was completely gone. So, I don't know. There's so many different ways this could go.
3 years after the hijacking, in 1971. The chances of it taking so long to travel via river seem implausible. Many people jump to the conclusion that Cooper returned to bury the money, perhaps to provoke the FBI. After digging up a huge area, the FBI finds no more money and no further clues. 9 years after the hijacking, the case remains unsolved. Today, this sleepy town of just a few hundred people is the Mecca of the legend of D.B. Cooper. Here at the General Store, every year since 1974, a party is held in Cooper's honor. On the Saturday after Thanksgiving, people from all over the country come to pay tribute to the man they believe got away with it.
Here's to D.B. Cooper!
Cheers!
Yeah!
He put area Washington on the map. He made it a legend.
Can you imagine how ballsy it is to jump out of a 727 in a rainstorm at night wearing loafers? That's one tough-ass dude.
To this day, I think he's still alive.
I think that D.B. Cooper is sitting on the beach in Mexico, drinking and having a good time, yes.
Truthfully, you're not D.B. Cooper, right?
I ain't gonna tell nobody nothing.
My name's Dan Cooper.
Yeah, right. I wish. Okay, where's all that money, honey?
Over the years, the story of D.B. Cooper has grown to almost mythic status. He's inspired books, songs, documentaries, movies, and even aviation regulations. 1971 was the era of Vietnam and civil rights protests. It generated a mood of distrust towards authority.
People tended to root for people who would strike out against authority. D.B. Cooper, to that extent, was an excellent symbol.
D.B. Cooper was a modern-day pirate of the sky, and in a way he did something, an act that was so daredeviling, that he became a fixture in the collective imagination of the country.
This was not a common hoodlum. He dressed in a business suit. He had an attaché case. He drank bourbon. He was, to those degrees, gentlemanly. The way that James Bond was a gentleman secret agent, D.B. Cooper attempted to be a gentleman thief.
Who was Dan Cooper? Gentleman thief or violent criminal? Despite evidence to the contrary, some of Cooper's old adversaries in the FBI would like to believe he is nothing but a common criminal.
He probably was just another old con. He talked like an old con. He used filthy language. He was of an age that he had probably led a life of crime, and he was a loser.
But there's little in witness statements to support Himmelsbach's claims. Some stories in the media portrayed Cooper as a chain smoker and a drinker. It's an image that Larry Carr thinks is wrong.
I don't believe D.B. Cooper was a drinker hardly at all. You would think that someone that was going to be in a very stressful situation would certainly have more than one drink if he was a drinker, and certainly would have smoked many, many more cigarettes than just the 8 that he did.
Carr finds a profile of the typical Raleigh cigarette smoker. He was upscale and well-educated. Likewise, Carr finds that bourbon and 7-Up was popular with a sophisticated crowd in the 70s. If Cooper was a gentleman thief, money wasn't his only motive. At one point in the flight, Tina Mucklow asked Cooper why he'd picked on Northwest Orient. He replied, "It's not that I have a grudge against your airline. I just have a grudge." It's these conflicting portraits that have kept the legend alive.
We don't know if he lives or if he dies. That adds to the mystery. It's like having a novel without a final chapter. We want to know how it turns out.
Over the years, the FBI have interviewed over 1,000 suspects. But finding Cooper has always eluded them. Then in 2007, a new suspect emerges that seems particularly credible. The source is a New York private investigator, Skip Porteous. Porteous has been contacted by a man claiming to know the identity of D.B. Cooper.
I asked him, what's this all about? And he said, I know who D.B. Cooper was. And I said, how do you know that? And he said, well, I grew up with him. He was my brother.
Porteous finds a number of parallels between new suspect Kenneth Christensen and D.B. Cooper.
At the time of the Cooper hijacking, Kenneth Christensen was a flight attendant for Northwest Orient Airlines. He knew the planes and he knew the schedules.
In the early 70s, Christensen has some grievance over redundancies and pay cuts. At the time, he's making around $150 a week. Just a year after the 1971 skyjack, Christensen purchases a large South Washington house in cash. It's a huge amount to have saved from his modest paycheck. Christensen, like Cooper, is a bourbon drinker and a regular smoker. There's also a resemblance to the sketch of Dan Cooper. Florence Schaffner is shown Christensen's photograph.
She said it looks more like D.B. Cooper than any other photo she's ever seen.
But this evidence has not convinced the FBI.
He never admitted that he was Dan Cooper. It's just a relative saying, I think he's Dan Cooper, with nothing to show that he possibly is Dan Cooper.
Stories like Christensen have kept the legend of D.B. Cooper alive for decades. Now, the daring jump will be recreated in the hope of discovering if Cooper survived. Today, all the evidence from the Cooper case fits into this small box. The open parachute and pack, the tie and tie pin, the plane ticket and samples of the recovered money are all that remains. Now, the case is being re-examined in the hope that modern police methods can reveal new clues. Paleontologist Tom Kacee is lending his services to the investigation and has become the lead citizen scientist. His examination of the tie reveals a new secret: small particles of pollen.
The pollen means that this is where this tie was in the spring, not in November when he jumped.
The identity of the hijacker remains a mystery. Larry Carr believes he might have a new lead. A European comic book hero of the 1960s is a fearless pilot called Dan Cooper. The dashing hero carries out brave missions, including parachuting from planes. It's possible that the skyjacker was a fan of the comic and used the alias for his crime.
Maybe someone that never even thought of their relative as being Dan Cooper, but disappeared in 1971, and they're searching in the attic, and all of a sudden they find these comic books from Dan Cooper. I mean, that would be huge.
But Tom Kacee knows what evidence they will need to convince people that the legendary Dan Cooper died that night.
Well, really what it's going to take to solve the D.B. Cooper case is D.B. Cooper's body. It's kind of like Bigfoot. You know, you can come up with lots of evidence, but until you have a dead body, you really haven't solved the case.
While probability now points to D.B. Cooper's death, without hard evidence, many people today still believe that he survived.
I say there's a good possibility that Dan Cooper survived the jump and is out there.
The legend of D.B. Cooper has it that he was a gentleman thief, that he stole $200,000 without hurting anyone and leapt into the darkness and into history. Whatever the truth, it is not the end of the story. It's more like...
So that's National Geographic's theory. They think that he rather died on that night in 1971. But here is the Lamino documentary from just a few years ago. It's a 30-minute documentary. We're going to go through most of it. But this theory states that he ended up surviving that night.
Between weeks, a search was made of the plane immediately.
We don't know who he was, where he came from, or where he went. I expect that we'll keep looking until we find him or find out what happened.
In the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, a middle-aged man carrying a briefcase walked into Portland International Airport and purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington. The man identified himself as Dan Cooper, and along with 36 other passengers and a crew of 6, he soon boarded Northwest Airlines Flight 305. Once aboard, Cooper made himself comfortable in the middle of the last row of seats on the right side of the cabin. He ordered a drink and had a smoke, because this was the 70s. Once the flight was cleared for departure, Cooper turned around and handed an envelope to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. Inside the envelope was a note featuring a handwritten message stating he had a bomb. Schaffner reluctantly sat down beside him and glimpsed what appeared to be 8 sticks of dynamite inside his briefcase. Cooper's demands were quite simple. He wanted $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. He also demanded a fuel truck to stand ready to refuel the aircraft once they landed in Seattle. Should they fail to comply with his demands, he threatened to, quote, do the job. Once the flight was airborne, Schaffner went to inform the cockpit crew, while another flight attendant by the name of Tina Mucklow remained by Cooper's side. By using a telephone in the rear of the cabin, Mucklow acted as an intermediary between Cooper and the rest of the flight crew for the remainder of the hijacking. For the next hour and a half, Flight 305 maintained a holding pattern near Seattle, while local and federal authorities scrambled to procure the ransom as well as the 4 parachutes. 10,000 $20 bills were collected from a local bank, while the owner of a nearby skydiving school supplied the chutes. At 5:45 p.m., more than 2 hours past its scheduled arrival, Flight 305 finally touched down in Seattle. By this point, it was well after sunset, and the aircraft was brought to a remote section of the tarmac. Once the flight came to a stop, both the ransom and the parachutes were handed over to Mucklow, who then brought them back aboard. In exchange, Cooper permitted 2 of the flight attendants as well as all the passengers to disembark, many of whom had not yet realized the flight had been hijacked. With the ransom paid and only 4 crew members remaining on board, Cooper told Mucklow to inform the captain that he wanted to fly to Mexico City. They were to fly with the landing gear down, the flaps at 15 degrees and below 10,000 feet. The lights in the cabin were to be switched off, and the aft stairway, which opens from the underbelly of the fuselage, was to remain extended. 2 of Cooper's demands could not be satisfied. First of all, the flight configuration he'd requested would not allow for a non-stop flight to Mexico City. As such, Cooper proposed a refueling stop in Phoenix, Yuma, or Sacramento before they all agreed on Reno, Nevada. Second of all, it was not possible to depart with the ventral staircase extended. Cooper agreed to retract the stairs on the condition that Mucklow remained by his side and taught him how to extend them once the plane was airborne. Parked for nearly 2 hours due to complications with refueling, Flight 305 was back in the air by 7:36 p.m. Less than 5 minutes after takeoff, Cooper told Mucklow to head for the cockpit and that from this point onwards he was not to be disturbed. The last time she saw Cooper, he was standing in the middle of the aisle as if though he was preparing to jump. Mucklow joined the rest of the crew, locked the cockpit door behind her, and some 3 hours later, Flight 305 safely landed in Reno. Once the flight came to a stop, the crew carefully ventured into the rear of the cabin, but there was no sign of Cooper nor the bomb. The aft stairway had been extended mid-flight and was slightly damaged upon landing. It seemed there was only one explanation for the hijacker's absence. At some point between Seattle and Reno, Cooper had strapped on a parachute, walked down the stairs, and leaped into the dark of night. Although the flight crew did report something odd, the last communication with the hijacker occurred at approximately 8:05 p.m. when the crew used the intercom to offer assistance, which Cooper declined. Within the next 10 minutes, the crew experienced what they described as an oscillation or vibration of the aircraft. At the time, the crew suspected it might have been produced by Cooper's jump, and a subsequent recreation of the hijacking supported that conclusion. Okay, so that took care of the when, but what about the where? While Cooper was very explicit about the flight's configuration and destination, he never specified any kind of route. In fact, Cooper grew so impatient with the slow refueling in Seattle that he dismissed the captain's request to file a flight plan and simply told him to, quote, get the show on the road. As such, the captain chose to fly along an airway known as Victor 23 without any input from Cooper. By using Victor 23 as a guide, authorities estimated the most probable location of the flight at the approximated time of the jump was about 40 kilometers north of Portland. And so, at the break of dawn, the FBI mounted an impressive search operation using helicopters, airplanes, and ground troops. The problem was, even if the estimated bailout point was accurate, Cooper's eventual landing or drop zone was far more difficult to pinpoint. The loosely defined search area covered a vast stretch of mountainous wilderness occluded by a dense forest, so it was truly like finding a needle in a haystack. Apart from the difficult terrain, the search was further complicated by low temperatures and inclement weather, which persisted for days. Despite their best efforts, authorities never managed to find a single trace of Cooper, nor the items he'd brought along with him. Difficult as possible for Cooper to spend his money. Northwest Airlines and several newspapers even began to offer rewards to anyone who could find a note with a matching serial number. In spite of these efforts, no one ever did. That is until nearly a decade later. In early 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram was building a campfire on a small beach in southern Washington. As he was digging into the sand, Ingram discovered 3 bundles of cash totaling $5,880. Having heard about the infamous skyjacking, Ingram's parents brought the severely degraded bundles to the FBI. The notes were promptly inspected, and sure enough, the serial numbers matched those of the ransom.
So there you have it. Those are the 2 most relevant and viral documentaries about D.B. Cooper. Like I said, the FBI stopped searching in 2016 and really has no incentive to reinvestigate the case. But guys, when it comes down to it, I have no idea who this guy is. I mean, you can take guesses based off what we saw. It could be Vince Peterson. It could be McCoy. There's a lot of different people that this could be, but the thing I noticed with a lot of the suspects is they looked nowhere near the description of what the flight attendants described D.B. Cooper as. So it's also possible that the suspects that we saw weren't even D.B. Cooper at all, and he could have just been completely elusive and nobody has any idea who the real identification of Dan Cooper is. We're 53 years into this mystery and we're not seeming to get any closer to a solution.